Hi all. Today let's see how we can view and modify the DOM by making use of the Chrome DevTools and especially the Elements tab. So in order to open the Chrome DevTools, we can right click on the page and click on Inspect. So the first tab which is shown by default is the Elements tab. So in this scenario, wherever we right click on the element, that particular element will be highlighted when the Elements tab is open. So the data which we see here, this is called the DOM tree. Before getting started, let's see what's the difference between HTML and the DOM. So whenever we request a page, so in this case, I have taken the angular.io web page. When we take the page, the initial request will be a navigation request, which will be requesting for the web page, and the response will be a text response, which is in the HTML format. So once this HTML is received by the browser, it parses the HTML and converts this into a tree of nodes called the DOM, that is the document object model. So once the DOM is created, what happens is that we might be making use of scripts within our application. So these scripts will run on the initial DOM and make the changes as per our application logic. So the difference between HTML and DOM is that the HTML represents the initial state of our web page, while the DOM is the current state of our web page. That is, after any action has been executed by the scripts. So the view which we see here currently in the Elements tab, it represents the DOM. So using the Elements tab, we will be able to inspect any element within our web page. So let us inspect this image. So for that, we can do two things. Either we can right click on that element and click on inspect. Then that particular element will be highlighted within our Elements tab. Or there is another option where you can click on this icon, and when we just hover on top of that element, it will automatically highlight that element within the Elements tab. So using either of this method, we will be able to inspect a particular element. So once we have selected an element, we will be able to navigate through these elements using the keyboard. So this is just by making use of the arrow keys, like the down arrow, up arrow, and in case you press the right arrow, for nested elements, we will be able to traverse to the inner elements, that is the child elements. Similarly, when we have selected a child element, when we press on the left arrow, we will be able to navigate to the parent and then collapse the particular element. And also there is another option. Suppose I select this particular footer, which is not in this particular viewport, that is not visible at that particular time within the page. So we can right click on this particular element, and there is an option called scroll into view. So once we click on that, immediately that element will be shown within the viewport. Another option which is available within the Elements tab is the search option. So in order to find any particular element within this web page, what we can do is we can press the Control F button, and here there is a search option where we will be able to search by using any string, selector, or even the XPath. So let us search for the image tag. So you can see that all the image tags are shown within the result. We'll be able to navigate through each of the result by pressing the up and down keys. So the down key shows the next result, while the up key goes to the previous result. Similarly, we have another option called the ruler. It basically helps us to see the dimensions of each of the element in a better way. So we can enable that by pressing Ctrl Shift P, and we have the option to enable ruler on hover. So we can select that. When we hover on any particular element, you will be able to see a ruler on the side of our application. So here now I am hovering on the top bar. You can see the ruler being displayed on the left side, and also we have size of each element being displayed with a border. The same ruler we will be able to enable by making use of the settings. You can click on the settings, and here we have the option show rulers on hover. We can enable or disable it. So now let's see some of the ways in which we can modify the contents of the DOM. So first, let us try changing the text for this particular content. So first we need to double click on the particular content. Once we do that, the content will be highlighted. Then we will be able to select the part we need to delete, and we can delete the content and press enter. So once you do that, immediately you can see that the changes are reflected in the DOM. Similarly, we will be able to modify the attributes. So in case of elements, that is in this scenario the h2 tag, you can see there are different attributes called id, class and all. So in order to modify that, either we can double click on that particular attribute, or you can right click and we have the option to add attribute, edit attribute. So let us click on edit attribute and remove that particular class. So this way you will be able to modify the attributes. We also have the option to change the element itself. So we can double click on the element, and in case I need to replace the h2 with an h1, we can just type the h1, and once we press enter, you can see that the tag has been automatically changed as h1 and the changes are reflected here. Similarly, we can even edit the entire HTML. So we can right click on the element and click on edit as HTML. So now basically it becomes a text format. We can make any kind of modification within the currently selected tag. So here let's add a tag just to see whether any change happens. So now since I have made the change, we can click outside, and now you can see that that particular element has become a link. So let us undo the change. So for that we can press the Ctrl Z. So it became H1. Now it became H2. So there can be scenarios in which we need to change the position of the elements. That is, we need to reorder this. So let's try that. So you can see that currently this is the H2 tag, and we have this P tag here. So let us toggle the position of these two. So what I am going to do is, we can click on the particular div and drag the element and just drop it. So now what happened is the div tag has gone above the p tag. So this way we will be able to change the order of the elements, and immediately it will be reflected within the web application. So now you can see that the h1 tag went below the images. So in this way we will be able to reorder the elements. Similarly, we have the option to hide a particular element. So let us try and hide this header. So for that we can just press on the H key. So once we have pressed on that, you can see that that particular element is hidden. But that is hidden by making use of the visibility hidden. So if you check here in the style, you can see that the visibility hidden is applied. The space which is occupied by the element, that will be still retained. We can show the element again by pressing the H key, and in case you need to delete that particular element, you can just press on the delete key and that element will be removed from the DOM. Now let us see another option in which we will be able to modify the state of a particular element. So the states, as you might know, there are different states for an element, that is active, hover, focus, visited, focus within, and focus visible. So you can force the state of an element to any of these states by making use of this option, that is right click on the element. So in this case, I have selected this particular A tag. So now you can see that when we hover on this A tag, an underline will be displayed. So in the normal state, it won't be displayed. So we can forcefully change the state by right clicking on that link, and here you have the option called force state. So I am going to select the hover state. So once we click on that, you can see that automatically the hover state is always enabled. So once we have done this, you will be able to see a highlighted symbol here on the hover. So the same thing we will be able to attain through our this option. So we have the toggle element state in the style tab. So once we click on that, all the options are visible here as well. So you can select it from here as well. So both of these are the same options. So in one of the previous videos, we had explored the sources tab, which can be used for debugging our application. So there can be certain scenarios in which you know that a particular element in your web application that is getting changed based on certain conditions, that is within the JavaScript, but you don't know exactly which part of the JavaScript is actually making the change. So in such cases, you will not be able to set a breakpoint for that program since you don't know which line of code is actually modifying that element. So for that, we have an option called DOM breakpoint. So in this scenario, let us take the example of this accordion. So here we have this accordion where we'll be able to expand and collapse these elements. So what I need to find is I need to find the code which actually makes this change. So for that purpose, what I can do is we inspect that particular element. So we go here. This is the element. We can select the button. So here I have selected the button. Now what we can do is we have the option called break on. So there are three options. One is subtree modification. That is, in case any of the child elements within the node is modified, then we will be able to make use of the subtree modification. Other is the attribute modification, which basically triggers whenever any attribute of the current element is modified by the script. And finally, we have the node removal, which will be useful in case the particular element is being removed from the DOM. So in this scenario, what we can do is we can enable all the three options, and let us click on the particular button. So now you can see that when I clicked on that button that is getting started, immediately the execution was paused on a certain line. So what happened is that the line within the script which is actually causing the expanding and collapsing of that particular accordion, that has been reached. So this is the particular line of code, and when it reaches that line of code, the execution is paused. So we will be able to see the DOM breakpoints. Within the sources tab, we have a section called DOM breakpoints. Once you expand that, you will be able to see all the DOM breakpoints, and the current DOM breakpoint will be highlighted. So this is one place where we will be able to see. Similarly, we have another place within the elements tab. We have a section called DOM breakpoints. There also we'll be able to see all the breakpoints. Now here we will be able to debug our application just like normally we debug using the sources tab. So here we will be able to continue the execution, and again you can see that another time the breakpoint has hit when another attribute has been modified. So this will be quite useful when you know that a particular element is being modified but does not know which part of the code is actually modifying the element. So one thing you would have noticed within the elements tab is that whenever we select a particular element, there is a symbol which is showing that this element is equal to $0. So when you hover on that, you can see that it shows a message to use the $0 in the console to refer to this element. So let's try that. So I pressed on the escape key to open the console here itself. And when we type $0, you can see that actually the currently selected element is being displayed. So when we hover on that, you can see that the image tag is getting displayed. That is the logo. Hero logo is getting highlighted. So making use of this, you will be able to access all the properties of that element, and also we will be able to execute queries using the query selector or query selector all option. Also, we have the option to save this particular element as a global variable. So once we right click, we have the option to store as global variable. Once you click on that, you can see that a global variable called temp1 has been created. Also, we have the option to copy this particular element as a JS path. So once we do that, you will be able to paste that, and you will be able to get the selector which can be used to query that particular element. So using that, we will be able to query the currently selected element. So when we selected that particular element, we were able to access that element using the $0. So using the $0, we will be able to access the properties of that element. So how can we see what are the different properties attached to a particular element? So what we can do is just click on the selected element, and here we have a tab called properties. Click on that, you will be able to see all the properties of that element. So you can see that these two properties, that is ng context and zone symbol click false, these are being shown in bold format. So which basically means that these two keys or these two properties are the own properties of this element, while all the other properties which are displayed here, these are inherited. So that is the meaning of this bold notation. And similarly, these properties can have any value, like basically what all values that are supported by JavaScript. Like we can have functions, Boolean, numbers, we can have arrays, objects, all these things. So we have an array here. Similarly, we have an object here, and even we can have DOM nodes as properties. So once we hover on that particular DOM node, we will be able to see that within our web application. Another useful feature within the Elements tab is the badges. So here you would have seen some badges which are being displayed, like the flex, which is basically showing that this particular element has a display flex attached to it within the style. So here you can see that the CSS display flex is available within that particular element. So all these elements will be having this particular badge, and in case you click on that badge, you can see that that particular flex layout is being displayed here. And the same thing we will be able to see within the layout tab. So once you click on the layout tab, we have different sections which represent the grid layout as well as the flexbox layout. So currently we have selected this particular button. The same thing which we achieved here by clicking on the badge, we can achieve by toggling the checkbox here. So now that particular flexbox is removed from highlighting. And similarly, we have the grid as well. So this is a grid layout. So once we select this, you can click on this particular show element. Now that particular element will be shown, and we can scroll to that element. So now you can see that this element is being displayed using the display grid. So if you check the style, you should be able to see that. So here we have the display grid CSS. So using the display grid, we will be actually able to easily change the alignment of this particular grid. So we can click on this icon which is shown near to the display grid. So we have the different options like align content, align items, justify content. So here we have given the justify center. We can change it to start or end. We can try out the different options here itself and check whether any modification is being shown within the element. So now when I click on the align item center, you can see that the items are getting aligned to the center of the grid. So this is quite helpful. The same way we will be able to modify our flex as well. The flex layout also has similar properties within the style. So here near the flex we will be able to see the option and we will be able to modify that accordingly by making use of these options. So hope you were able to get a good idea about how we can make use of the Elements tab within the Chrome Developer Tools to view and modify the DOM contents. See you soon. Thank you.